We will develop the liquid gold that is right under our feet, including American oil and natural gas, and we will also embrace nuclear, clean coal, hydropower, which is fantastic, and every other form of affordable energy to get it done. We will not only match China, we will be cheaper than China by a lot, and more energy will mean lower inflation, and it'll mean more jobs.
We need to break away from China a lot. But explain what you mean when you say that China's got to be separate.
They steal our IP. They don't act like a leading country of the world. Go outside of economics. One of the biggest frustrations I had when I was in the White House in the beginning of COVID was we couldn't get any information out of the Chinese. If that pandemic had started in, say, Argentina would have said, look, please everybody come take a look, help us figure out what the heck is going on. China did the exact opposite, and the world sort of muddled through it for this first several months because China wasn't acting like a leading country of the world. And as long as they're going to act like that, act like, dare I say it, a communist nation, which is what they are, you have to treat them like that. We beat the Soviet Union without firing a single shot because we knew how to deal with communist nations. Why we treat China any different, I have no idea.
All right, guys, good to see you all. I hope you actually had an enjoyable and blessed weekend. For those who were celebrating, I hope you had a very, very blessed Easter. It's always nice to spend time with family and catch up. So got the chance to do that. I have a feeling we've said this all along. So you know what? I never know. Every time I think we're going to get like a break or a pause, the Trump administration just doesn't slow down. And I think that's going to be the case again this week. I wouldn't be surprised if today is a quiet day because he's in Florida, probably wants to play golf. Beautiful, not a lot going down. But with everything that's going on with tariffs, et cetera, I don't think that means that there's a pause. And frankly, with all of the staff activity, I mean, you think about what's happening. We talked about this last week, but between the tariffs, the Associated Press, which is internal and a media fight or whatever, stuff that's happening with Israel and Iran, right? I mean, so many of the stuff internationally with Ukraine still doing what it's doing. JD Vance is traveling abroad, so you never know what's going to happen on that front. And then you still have the domestic issues like Harvard fighting back for whatever reason. It's just, and then there's obviously a need to get the reconciliation bill moving forward, but I don't think we're going to hear a lot. That Congress is not in session this week. But you get my point. I don't think that it's going to be quiet or like Biden quiet, but I think you will see some things as the week goes on. Today, I've got two really cool interviews to share with you. We're going to talk to Kevin Hassett about what the policies are in terms of the tariffs, why we're doing what we do. What do they hope to get? Because to me, that is the key thing. And then we're going to talk to former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney about the process and what they have to have. Now, I'm going to do something really cool for you guys at the end that I'm excited about, and I hope you enjoy. I'm going to actually give you a little tour of the White House. I filmed some stuff, and I want to give you guys a sense of what it's like to go in. Because a lot of people, even if you get the White House tour, the public tour, it's the East Room, the Red Room, the State Dining Room, the East Room, all very nice. I did it too as a kid. But I want to show you what it's like, as a media type coming in because the West Wing and what it looks like. And, a lot of times you hear things about what it's like to work there or the spaces or how things operate. And I wanted to give you a sense of what that was like because I don't think anybody else actually does that. And I wanted to be to share this with you. So after Mick, I will kind of show you the video I shot and narrate what it's like inside of there, because again, for a lot of people, there's this sense of like what goes on there and how people operate. And obviously my goal is to show it to you. So the first thing that I want to do is introduce Kevin Hassett. He is the chairman. He's the director of the National Economic Council. And remember, this is a guy who's been around Trump a long time. I've known Kevin. He was in the first administration. He served as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. He is someone that the president has come to trust when it comes to trade policy and economic policy. Very steady hand. And the funny thing is, if you dig in to Kevin, which, I sort of have, he was on the Trump team before a lot of folks were. He's got a very long, prestigious history, served in the Bush administration, was at the American Enterprise Institute, AEI. But this is a guy who thinking is not always been the sort of go along, get along Republican conventional wisdom. Kevin Hassett is actually very, very America first. And he is someone that the president has come to rely on. And I think you're going to see that in this interview. So I want to stop and show you what Kevin Hassett has to say. Then we'll do Mick Mulvaney. And then I'm going to give you a tour of the White House briefing area and room and give you a sense of the workspaces, places that I don't think anyone's ever shown before. So I think this is what's going to be cool. And I'll explain it. Before I get going, you guys have heard me talk about this before, but if if you run a company and you're in charge of the finances, or you're that person, the CFO, or you just get handed all the receipts, and your company's got between like either 5 or 5,000 employees, it doesn't matter. You need to get yourself onto the Ramp system. So they send you these cards. This is like a regular Visa card issued by Ramp, but they send the physical and the virtual ones. You can sign up in like 15 minutes. They've got this white glove service where they will help onboard you and your team and integrate your systems with theirs. It is an ultimate game changer. You know what it's like. You're running around, you've got receipts, you're trying to set expense accounts for everybody. No more. Ramp makes life so much easier for your company. You'll save tons of time and actually a lot of money too. The people that I know, including my own company, we've switched over to Ramp. It is a total game changer. The money that you spend and the time you spend gets eliminated. It's so easy to use and to integrate. It's unbelievable. Over 25,000 companies have switched over to Ramp, including Shopify and the Boys and Girls Club. It was just named #1 in spend management by G2. And for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 in your pocket when you join Ramp. So just go to ramp.com/Sean Spicer. Full word, no spaces. Ramp.com/Sean Spicer. Ramp.com/Sean Spicer. You'll thank me for this big time. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank members, FDIC. All right, let's take a look at Kevin Hassett and get a breakdown of where we are with tariffs. Kevin Hassett, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here, Sean.
Okay, so just for everybody who maybe the two people who didn't see what happened yesterday, walk us through what happened yesterday and where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really great to be back with you, Sean, and to be back here in the White House. Without you, I just miss you. We got to get you back. So I think that what happened, really not just yesterday, is that the president decided that he was going to charge tariffs on countries that were equal to either their tariffs or their non-tariff barriers, so that we would basically be treating them like they treat us. And of course, they've been mistreating American workers for a long, long time. After he made that announcement, then countries from all over the world, more than 70 countries, called us up and said, look, we got to talk. We got to talk. And up to 10 or 15 countries even made specific offers of, hey, we'll do this, we'll treat you better in the future if you reduce your tariffs. And basically, at some point, that the momentum from all of the positive negotiating action that we were doing reached such a height that the day before yesterday, everybody was talking about, well, so how should we go from here to the next step so that markets understand how successful President Trump's policies are? And we were talking about, well, maybe we should close a couple of the offered deals and announce them as like early signs of how successful this approach is. Or maybe we should pause the really high tariffs because there's so many people making progress. And in the end, we decided yesterday to do the pause. And of course, that's when markets that didn't really, I think maybe hadn't priced in the fact that we're really serious about making America great again and getting the trade deals to work, that they celebrated like never before as one of the best stock market days in history, because they could see that President Trump's policies were going to be a big success.
Yeah, I finally was able to look at my 401k again. I will tell you, I was searching for a meeting yesterday and I came across a quote that I thought was interesting. It said, if I was having some trouble closing a real estate deal, I would sue the guy. If he didn't give me what I wanted, a threat to sue would have no effect. But if I sued him the day before closing and then offered to withdraw the lawsuit as part of the deal, they almost always signed. They knew you meant it. Have you heard that before?
Boy, have I heard that before. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. this is what you wrote in the drift that Donald Trump had talked to you about.
He told me that you can't threaten to do something if you need to get concessions.
So was this another example of that? Was that him saying, "Hey, I got to go through with this so that they think I'm serious"?
Yeah, I think that, but not only that, but he is serious. It's like, okay, guys, look, if you don't fix this, then here are the consequences. And people looked at the consequences, and again, the consequences were fair. The tariffs that he was supporting at the time were estimated as a best estimate of the total impact of their negative trade policies, which are hurting America. And so when they look at it, they say, well, that's a really high tariff. Well, it's just what you're doing to us. Americans didn't get mad at the president because they said, oh, we're just treating them the way they're treating us. And so he kind of won it in so many dimensions that it really is something that in the next gold-plated edition of Art of the Deal, they should add a chapter on his.
Are you convinced though that these other countries are now equally committed to getting a deal, or are they going to say, "Gosh, maybe we interpret this as him backing down," or are they like, "We got it. We need to cut a deal so that 90 days or 89 days from now, I guess, that this doesn't happen again"?
Well, I can tell you that I'm highly confident that 15 to 20 countries will have really good deals in a relatively short time. And the countries that don't have the deals after they see that are probably going to wonder, oh, geez, look at how good it is for these guys. Why am I not talking to the president? And so my guess is that the sort of allies and friends and so on, we're already, I had a call with the president and the president of Switzerland already, and Japan and South Korea are fast forwarding towards us. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's really important that's moving forward, and even the EU, I could say.
There were some reports that the bond market really, not just reports. The president said people were getting the jitters. Explain to people what that did to the thinking and the calculus.
Well, what happened was that because the very high tariff on China went on, then there was a risk, actually somewhat realized, from bond market participants in their minds that China was going to start selling all the U.S. treasuries that they own, and that could be disruptive for markets. And so there was a moment yesterday where bond markets were sort of puzzled about how bad could it be if China starts really piling in and selling bonds, which would, of course, drive down their price and drive up the interest rate. And so you saw a spike in interest rates that was pretty large by historical standards. But then beginning at 12:45, we had a treasury auction where the new stuff that the treasury has to issue is sold. And in that treasury auction, it was a phenomenally successful auction. And a lot of people recognized that the market had sort of given them a profit opportunity by buying low or at high interest rates, but low prices. And the auction was incredibly successful. And that happened just before the close of the Twitter or the Truth Social message that said we're going to pause the tariffs. And so there were really two big positive developments as far as markets are concerned. The fact that the Treasury auction was so successful, and so the Chinese weren't really able to disrupt the U.S. Treasury market. And second, that we then paused the tariffs. And between the two, it was off to the races in terms of how good it was in equity markets, especially.
So, Kevin, let's talk about China for a second. Obviously, that's the big isolating factor now, right? We put a lot more tariffs on them. They tariffed us back. What's the play, right? Is it we want to negotiate one-on-one with them and take down the tariff and non-tariff barriers? Like, what is it? What does that negotiation look like with China in itself?
That's something that the president is going to decide. And the president has made it clear that he has high regard for President Xi. He thinks that they work well together. And at some point, I would expect that the two of them will have a conversation about this. But as of now, there's no schedule.
That's my, actually, here, you don't have to cut. My prediction is a big meeting in Beijing in July, but that's my take. Okay. But what does this mean in the short term for consumers? What does this mean right now if I'm buying stuff and I'm a small business owner and I'm reliant on some kind of products from them? Listen, and just to be clear, I'm glad the president's standing up to China. I believe it is an existential threat to us militarily, economically. We need to deal with this. But if you are a U.S. consumer or business owner right now, what does it look like for the next 30, 60 days?
One of the things that I think that you could dig into, if you haven't already planned to do it at a later part of the show, is today's announcement on the consumer price index. Because we got an announcement on what's happening in consumer inflation that's showing that the president's economic policies are again like hitting it like really out of the park. And so we had a decline in consumer prices. We had the biggest decline in drug prices that we've seen just about ever. Energy prices are way down. And so inflation is really at its best level now since really the very, very beginning of the Biden administration. I think the last time inflation was this good was the March before all of that crazy spending happened that set inflation into a disaster. And so inflation is way down because of the economic policies of the president. So the deregulation is making it easier for people to do stuff with lower costs. The fact that we've been cutting spending through DOGE, that we've made it clear with the reconciliation package, which, again, the budget instructions passed the House today, that we made it clear that we're not going to be that runaway inflation government that looks like Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden. We're going to be supply siders that increase the supply of stuff so prices go down. And I think that one of the things that's happening that we can see with the trade uncertainty over the last few months is that everybody is rushing to produce more stuff into the U.S. And the increase in production in the U.S. has been so striking that even with the tariffs that were put in place, some of them ahead of this report, inflation went down. Right. It's really quite remarkable.
So there's things though that what I think a lot of people say to me is, hey, I support the president. I get that he's standing up for us. We've had unfair trade practices and that China presents a threat, but there's certain things that we don't make in America, or that, I mean, like, I'll give you an example, like potash fertilizer. Like, you can't make it here. It's made in Canada. Like, how do we adjust for supply chain issues that we do or don't make in America?
Well, the U.S. Trade Representative has an annex of things that we don't make in America or can't grow in America that are excluded from the tariffs. And so I think that we'd have to go thing by thing to see, is this a thing that qualifies as something that's not tariffed? But yes, there's a very, very long list of things that we just have to import that are excluded from the tariffs already.
All right. The only thing I wanted to cover with you is pharmaceuticals. The president went after pharmaceuticals. And again, I agree. Post-COVID, the idea that we had to look back at China for a lot of our stuff, but the reports that I read, and I'm not an expert on this, which is why I want to ask you, is a lot of medicines are generic and there's not a huge profit margin. So what's the thinking behind tariffing pharmaceuticals, and how will that impact us?
Well, again, right now, pharmaceuticals are excluded from the reciprocal tariffs, and even the paused reciprocal tariffs, are at 10%, but don't apply to pharmaceuticals. And so, in the fullness of time, the president believes that we need to, for national security reasons, make sure that we have a good, solid supply of pharmaceuticals here in the U.S., so that if a foreign adversary were to decide to withhold medicines, that it wouldn't cost American lives. And so we've got a long-run policy of trying to onshore pharmaceutical production, and we've been doing it, basically through deregulatory efforts that have been attracting capital. You saw that we just had this announcement of a big new plant from Eli Lilly, but we're also considering future tariffs, and we'll, study them and make sure that they don't happen in a disruptive way. But we do need to, as a national security matter, get pharmaceutical production to happen more onshore.
All right, Kevin, last question for you. For the average American who doesn't follow the ups and downs of the market right now and says, okay, in a nutshell, just tell me, 30 seconds, what did we get this week as a country? Why are we better off than we were on Monday here now towards the end of the week?
We're way better off right now than we were on the 20th of January, all the way through. And forget about the chatter that, on the news outlets that are, way less responsible than you are, Sean. Let's look at the economic data. We've had two magnificent jobs reports. The jobs reports were incredible. 10,000 automobile jobs, a big increase in manufacturing jobs, big increase in every kind of job. The market thought there'd be about 150,000 jobs created. It was almost 230,000 in the last jobs report. And then what happens is they have this old thing called the Phillips curve, right, where it says that if you have job growth, then that causes inflation. And so while we've got this amazing job growth from President Trump's policy, we got a big reduction in inflation. So this is exactly what happens when the supply side works, right? And so we've got people going back to work, increasing the supply of labor, increasing the supply of products. We've got firms, bringing trillions of dollars of investment back into the U.S. That increases the supply of stuff. And when you increase the supply of stuff, so suppose you got an apple tree and then you get another apple tree. And so now you've got an apple farm with 2 apple trees. Well, when you go to the market, you got a lot more apples, but you're going to have to lower the price if you want to sell all the apples. And that's what's going on. We got a lot more apples and people are lowering the prices.
A lot more apples. Kevin Hassett, Director of the National Economic Council. Appreciate you being with us. And again, it was nice to have your book, The Drift, so I could get a little bit of insight into the thinking here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Amazing. I want to kind of take this back out a second, if you will, bring in former White House Acting Chief of Staff and former Budget Director, OMB, Office of Management and Budget, Mick Mulvaney, to get a different perspective on what we're doing and why with respect to tariffs, the budget, and the tactics. Before I get there, you guys know this. You want to start a day with a great cup of coffee. This is my recommendation. Wired to Fish. It is amazing, amazing cup of coffee. With Arabica beans. They are sourced from some of the best places. I'm a big fan, as you guys know from watching the show, of the medium roast. They've got all sorts of flavors. It depends on who you are, what your tastes are. But I love it. Whenever a group comes over, the morning meeting, my family, whatever, I bake a big pot. Everybody says they love it. What I like more than that is not just the great cup of coffee, but knowing that this company is based and built on values that I support. It's so cool because 25% of the profits go back to faith-based initiatives, fishing initiatives, clean water initiatives. It's awesome. And when you go to wire2fishcoffee.com and it's the numeral 2, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. Just great, great people. And I love voting with my wallet. I just got a shipment this week. Literally, I ordered, I pay for it myself. I happen to get one with the Sean Spicer Show Yeti. They are still available. They're discounted, by the way, if you want. But I'm telling you, it is such a great cup of coffee. So you can use the code WeCare, one word, WeCare, for 10% off. Go right over right now. This is a great time to do this. Wired2fishcoffee.com. Let's make 2025 a year that we align our values and our wallet, right? Drink a coffee that's good and you can feel good about going down. By the way, also this week, sorry to be rain on your parade. Tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble may be ahead because the IRS is still on a rampage. If you have unfiled or you have back taxes and you missed the deadline, you guys know, I hate to say this, it's a reality. The IRS is going to come after you with over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily and tools that they have at their disposal, like property seizures and bank levies and wage garnishments. These guys are serious. But here's the good news. There is still time to get help. And the best people in the business, as far as I'm concerned, hands down, are the professionals at Tax Network USA. These guys have got you covered. They have a direct preferred line into the IRS. They literally know who to talk to and who to stay away from. So if you have unfiled or unpaid taxes, don't wait. Do not get behind the 8 ball when it comes to the IRS. Stop the penalties, stop the calls, stop the harassing, and get the professional help. You can talk for free to one of their strategists. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. One word, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. You may have missed the deadline, but you are not out of time when it comes to getting help. Call the folks at Tax Network USA or visit them at tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. So without further ado, former South Carolina Congressman, former White House Acting Chief of Staff, former Director of the Office of Management and Budget under Trump, Mick Mulvaney. Congressman Mulvaney, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Spicer, it's always a pleasure.
All right, see, here's the beautiful thing. You've done the White House thing. You were the head of OMB and you're a congressman. So we're going to get it from all sides today. Just walk me through. Here's what I want people to understand. When you look at this, if you just read the media, it's like, oh, why are we doing this? And then when you go look at these tariff rates, some would say, why did we get ourselves into this situation in the first place? Why did we allow these tariff rates to be higher for our manufacturers, service providers, ranchers, farmers to get into X country, and ours were so low. Why did that happen?
Yeah, we did that as part of a soft power foreign policy for the last 50 or 60 years. That it was a way to build friends back in the Cold War, a way to sort of present a counterbalance to what Russia was trying to do around the world. So we try to use trade for foreign policy. Now, that changed a little bit, that the rationale changed a little bit when we got into NAFTA, when free trade and globalism and all those types of things where, in my mind, it was driven in large part by Wall Street that made a lot of money, but saw the end of a lot of American domestic businesses. I'm from the South, as you know, and I'm in textile country, and no one's in that business anymore. It destroyed an entire part of our economy. So look, there's a lot of reasons we got there. There's, one really good reason to get out of it, which is it is holding us back. So that part of what Trump is doing, I applaud. I think it's been far too long coming.
Do you think people in South Carolina believe that textiles can be brought back? Can we manufacture, or is that industry gone? I mean, because I guess part of what the White House is saying is, well, we want to onshore stuff, but is textiles one of those things that could be onshored again?
Yes and no. There are certain things that are probably never coming back because they're too labor intensive. And if you're paying somebody $2 a day to work in Vietnam, you're not going to be able to compete. But there are places where American textiles have done extraordinarily well, and they continue to be hampered by these overseas trade barriers and tariffs and so forth. So the answer is depends, right? The real simple stuff, the basic low value add stuff is probably not coming back, but there are opportunities that we've left on the table over the course of the last decades because of our trade policies.
So putting on your member of Congress hat for a second.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a lot of these members that are saying, Congress and constitutionally does have the actual role of trade negotiations. The president kind of mocked it last night. I will admit that as a former assistant U.S. trade rep, I get it, which is, do you really want 435 people negotiating a trade deal? But there's people in Congress that are clearly frustrated. I mean, is that just for show?
No, they're hearing about it back home. I mean, they're hearing about it from folks with the stock. Listen, anytime the stock market goes down by 10% in a couple of days, members of Congress, especially when it's related to a domestic policy like this is, members of Congress are going to hear about it. They're also going to hear about it from their business people who are trying to figure out, what the uncertainties are. What are our prices going to be, Mr. Congressman, if I'm buying stuff today from Canada? And that's who they know to reach out to as a member of Congress. That's part of the job, right? You are supposed to represent the people when you're in the House. So it's what you're supposed to be doing. So no, it doesn't surprise me they're getting the calls at all. Doesn't surprise me they're talking about taking some authority back. I think that's a bigger conversation, Sean. What the president is doing is legal. He's using authority given to him by Congress, by law. Congress could change that law if they wanted to and get the president to sign it or do it, over a veto or something like that. But it doesn't surprise me that there's a little bit of tension between the branches of government. That's the way our system is set up.
So there's this, the president keeps saying that these countries are paying these tariffs or whatever. And then I saw a story out this morning that said an iPhone could cost as much as $2,500 by Memorial Day, and that they were literally flying 5 full plane loads of iPhones into the country to get ahead of the tariffs because they didn't want them on a boat because obviously they wouldn't make it in time before that deadline last night. Once consumers start seeing that, right? I mean, if you not even just want to upgrade your iPhone, if you break it and you go, gosh, I got to get a new one. Now something that was, $900 or $1,000 is $2,500. How is this? I just don't, to me, I think that's where the White House is going to have a problem, is when people start saying, I'm with you. I get it. That's not fair. But why am I now paying twice as much for an iPhone or a TV or whatever?
No, you're right. And if the White House has sort of dropped the ball on anything, I think it's preparing people for what you've just said. I don't think you drop them in the middle of a trade war without preparing them. And they have to know that things are going to be more expensive. Now, they're not going to be as expensive as a lot of people say. If there's $100 worth of tariff, Sean, that doesn't mean that the price of the product is going to go up by $100. It does go up. Some of that will get eaten by the manufacturers. Some of it will get eaten by the retailer. Some of it will be, the impact will be lessened by the typical changes in currencies that happen when you put tariffs on. But prices are going to go up and people are going to be upset. You're absolutely right. Why did Donald Trump win the election as convincingly as he did because people were upset about the economy. And if he loses the high ground on the economy, that's a real trouble, not just for him because he's not running again, despite what the left says, but for the Republicans in the House and the Senate. That's what they're worried about. People vote their pocketbooks, and Donald Trump is not going to have a lot of time for this policy to sort of reap benefits if it's going to impact the midterm elections.
I think most people, I'm a champion of what he's saying. I believe, I agree. The soft power from decades ago, when we were fighting the Soviet Union, we wanted people to do business with us. We wanted to have a relationship with us. Those days are gone. But then the White House, so Trump's been clear for like 5 decades, reciprocity, like we should get what they get, et cetera. I get that part. But then I think what the White House did is they went out and started talking about deficit reduction. And we're going to have these tariffs. They're going to bring in more money. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to onshore stuff. They have 3 things. 1, lower the tariff, 100% on board on that. 2, reduce the deficit. Well, in order to do that, that means you have to keep the tariff in place. Therefore, you couldn't do number 1. And then number 3 is to onshore. And again, if you make number 1 happen, it makes it harder to make a company want to come back. Yes,
That's
there's
right.
some additional.
Yeah.
So that seems to be fundamentally. Now put your chief of staff hat back on, because it seems to me that you've got these factions in the White House, staff-wise, that are telling the president, oh, we can use it for this, we can use it for this, we can use it for that. And they're not clear on what the ultimate goal is.
No, listen, if you're asking me if I'm chief of staff, what am I telling the president? It would have been to fire Peter Navarro a long time ago, knowing that he's not going to fire Peter because Peter went to jail for him, to bury Peter someplace in the EOB so he can't do any more harm. What you just said is absolutely right, by the way, and it's been made worse by statements by folks like Peter. Peter's the one who came out and said, we're going to raise $6 trillion from these tariffs. No, you're not. That's simply not possible. Mathematically, that's never, ever going to happen, but it sort of raises expectations. What's rule number 1 in politics, Sean? Don't overpromise and underdeliver. And what some people in the White House, specifically Peter Navarro, have trying to convince people is you can use tariffs to raise a bunch of money and lower tariffs with other countries and rebuild American manufacturing. You can't do all of those things. Either you leave the tariffs in place forever and you hope that they raise a lot of money and you hope they rebuild manufacturing, or you use them as negotiations to get the 0 tariff deals. By the way, I think that's where Donald Trump is. You remember back in 2018 when he was in Canada at the G7 and the Europeans were giving him such a hard time about his threatened tariffs at that time. And he looked at them and said, how about 0, 0, 0? No tariffs, no non-tariff barriers, no subsidies. We just trade fair and square. Let's go. And of course, the Europeans wet themselves because they're not capable of doing that. I think that's where Trump probably is in his mind. He just wants a fair playing field on which we can compete.
100%. I think that's where his head is at. You brought up Peter Navarro. Of the 3 things that I laid out, what does he want? Or does he want all 3?
He wants all 3 and believes that you can have them. Keep in mind, the only person that I saw, and you and I follow this fairly closely, the only person of any import that I saw saying that the tariffs are going to raise $6 trillion was Peter Navarro. The very next day, Kevin Hassett, who is no dummy, okay, Hassett, he's the head of the CEA, right? Hassett came out and said, no, we think we'll get $6 trillion worth of investment because of tariffs. And Trump said the same thing. So it's only Navarro out there pitching this BS about how you can have tariffs fix everything in the whole world. Would I fire him? Sure, I would have fired him, but I would have fired him after the Ron Vara thing back in 2019.
But was he arguing the same thing in the first term? Was he arguing to get all 3? Because I only heard the onshoring. I mean the trade piece, and it's funny because I do wonder how much. So it seems to me though the interesting thing going back to the messaging is the president said, okay, you guys have a high tariff. We have basically none. I want these negotiations to occur, right? And then you immediately saw countries, Vietnam, Israel, Malaysia, reaching out and saying, okay, we want a deal. South Korea saying that we want a deal. Japan saying we want a deal. What the president, to me, politically speaking, would be smart to put these wins on the board. We got to deal with this. They took their thing down.
Now that's you and me, the former staffers, going to the boss today, say, listen, we need a win. Wall Street is no longer.
But isn't that where his head is, Mick? I mean, that's the thing.
I think so. And Wall Street is not listening anymore. Wall Street was turning on every word. Now I think they're looking for action, and I think he needs to put a win on the board, and not with Zimbabwe. I'm talking about some with South Korea, Japan, something significant to prove to people what this is all about, which is leveling the playing field so that American firms can compete on the world stage fairly. I think that's what Donald Trump wants, and if he plays it smart, and I think he's going to, that's what he's going to get.
I agree. I mean, my opinion is, if I were him, look, I've had this list all week long, right? You know, they've got Thailand 72%. I mean, I know you mentioned a couple of other ones, but Bangladesh 74, Israel 33, whatever, Australia 10, Pakistan 10. Why not just come out with a list and say, hey, I get the non-tariff barrier, by the way. I mean, that's a huge impediment to us selling cars in like South Korea and in the EU. But if you can say I got all these tariffs lowered, I think that's a huge win. And I would just take
a huge win, and the economy would boom. Look, I think a lot of what they're doing is the right move. I think it's the messaging, and again, I come back to Navarro screwing up the messaging, because that what they're doing can have huge benefits, and you add to it the deregulation and hopefully tax policy, and you're talking about all the benefits we had in Trump 1.0 multiplied by several powers.
Okay, so right now you're back in the chief of staff role. You go to him and say, Mr. President, politically, we're able to get your wins, right? And the economy will rebound, the stock market will rebound. That's where you would have him right now.
Yeah, China, I'd put in a separate category.
Okay, I want to get to that, though.
Yeah, there are geopolitical reasons to treat China differently. But when Israel comes in and says, look, we're going to take all our tariffs to zero, take a win. I mean, that is a huge win. You're right on non-tariff barriers. I mean, if it's zero tariff, but it takes 6 months to get a container through Israeli customs, that is a problem. If it's zero tariffs, but they've got safety checks, bizarre safety checks on American cars in South Korea, that's a problem. You got to work through those things, but you can work through them. He's got the leverage now to do that. Yeah, I'd be telling to put a win on the board, and I think that would calm the markets and also help the Republicans as we move closer to the midterms.
All right, so you brought it up. I look at the world and then China, right? And now China, we're talking about 104% tariff as of last night. Okay, they're going to retaliate against us, and every cheap thing that we get from China is going to get more expensive. Now, just to be clear, I'm kind of okay with this. I feel like we need to break away from China a lot. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, but explain what you mean when you say that China's got to be separate.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of geopolitical reasons for treating China differently. They steal our IP. They treat our investor very, very poorly. You have to do joint ventures. They don't act like a leading country of the world. Go outside of economics. One of the biggest frustrations I had when I was in the White House in the beginning of COVID was we couldn't get any information out of the Chinese. If that pandemic had started in, say, Argentina would have said, look, please, everybody come take a look. Help us figure out what the heck is going on. China did the exact opposite, and the world sort of muddled through it for this first several months because China wasn't acting like a leading country of the world. And as long as they're going to act like that, act like, dare I say it, a communist nation, which is what they are, you have to treat them like that. We beat the Soviet Union without firing a single shot because we knew how to deal with communist nations. Why we treat China any different, I have no idea. So
isn't it because they own part of our debt? I mean, like I think
debt. No, it's not, Sean. It's because Buick makes a lot of money in China. Blackstone makes a lot of money in China. Wall Street makes a lot of money in China. We never made that in Russia. Pepsi might have made a penny in China, but that's about it. No, this is Wall Street more than anything else.
So he cares about that. So I mean, or he does. I mean,
I think Trump is willing to. I think the tariffs, 100% tariffs, have shown that he's willing to treat China differently. I mean, I think that's the highest.
How did we walk this back? I mean, not walk it back, but how do we get a deal? Because I don't think that China looks like that they're looking. You know, every other country's going, please, sir, can we meet with you for 5 minutes and get a deal? China's basically like, screw you, we're raising our tariff.
Fine, let them. Listen. I would love to see, and I pitched this back in 2017. With Gary Cohn when we were in the White House together, and I still think it was the right plan of action. Mr. President, why are we picking a fight with the whole world when really China's the problem? Why don't we instead bring all of the world together to team up on China economically? By the way, that card can still be played. After he cuts all of his deals with all these countries around the world and everybody's at 0 and 0, 0, we're all friends again, that might be a good time to go. And now is the time to fix China. Germany knows it's a problem. France knows it's a problem. Brazil knows they're a problem. Japan knows they're a problem. China is a problem. Everybody knows it. And it'd be a great thing for us to do, sort of rally the world to try and fix that problem.
And I agree with that, because here's one thing I do am concerned about, which is, does this action push China or push Europe into China's arms by China kind of doing what they did with Huawei, which is, all right, the United States doesn't want to play ball. We'll give you our cheap stuff, Europe.
Well, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's another hour-long conversation for another show. Is Europe, and I'm taking the British out of this, and maybe the Eastern Europeans. So let's say Europe really is Germany, France, Italy to a lesser extent, the northern, Denmark, Netherlands, etc. Are they reliable partners? Are they ever going to be able to stand up to China? If China invades Taiwan tomorrow, will Germany be able to do to China what we've all done to Ukraine in terms of economics? I don't think so. I don't think they can. And I don't know if they're a reliable partner going forward. Keep in mind, the next generation of European leaders thinks the most important issue facing the world is climate change. Are those people you can really count on to sort of be a counterbalance to China? Maybe not. Maybe that is what's sort of colored Donald Trump's approach to Ukraine, of course, over the course of the last several months. It's a fascinating discussion to have, and it's not going to end with tariffs.
All right, Mick, kind of one last thing I want to cover with you. The House is trying to deal with the Senate budget bill right now.
Yeah.
I was over at the White House. I saw Chip Roy and a couple of these other guys. They don't look like they're ready to back down. I think this is going to be Johnson and Trump always get the bill over the finish line, and I would always bet with them. This time feels different. I don't get the sense. I think they've been jammed with the Senate bill that's got a lot more debt and not as much savings. I don't know that this is going to happen this time.
I share that concern. I was on the Hill yesterday talking to some friends of mine, middle level folks, right? Folks, everybody knows Chip Roy. Chip Roy's clearly going to be part of the conversation, and he should be. But I'm talking about folks that most folks wouldn't know. Members of Congress who came up to me yesterday at lunch and said, look, Mick, am I wrong in thinking this Senate deal is a terrible deal? I mean, it's clearly filtered down just below much more than just the folks who are in the news every night for being fiscal conservatives. There's a lot of Republicans concerned in the House about that Senate bill. I think it's going to be a real challenge. Make it clear, everybody is aligned on wanting to extend the tax bill. It's a question of how much money do you want to try and save at the same time. It looks like the Senate doesn't want to save hardly any, and that is rubbing a lot of Republicans in the House the wrong way, not just the names you see in the news.
So how would you, again, let's go back to take the member of Congress hat, put it back to the White House. As the Freedom Caucus guy, how do you then message to the House guys, hey, this is I need you to be on this vote just because we need to get to that phase? I understand their concern. I go, there's not a ton of reassurance that we're going to get any savings.
My bias here is towards the House. As a former House member, I hate the Senate. I just do as an institution. All sorts of, when the Republic fails, it would be because of the Senate. But when I put my chief of staff back hat out, and what I'm asking the president to do is, Mr. President, look, I think you're going to have more luck getting the Senate to move towards the House's position than you are getting the House to move towards the Senate position. House members tend to be a little more skittish because they do have to run every 2 years, but you still got a lot of credibility, a lot of political capital in the Senate. That the $4 billion number they threw up there that's going to be a problem. I think we need to work on the Senate more than the House.
And so is that a John Thune issue? Why wouldn't you? I mean, to me, that was a lame, low number.
Because the Senate doesn't want to save any money. I mean, that's not how Washington is wired. Fiscal conservatives are in the small minority in this town. Okay, the Senate wants to get a tax deal. We all want to get a tax deal, but getting the Senate to actually spend less money one year to the next would be a Herculean type of effort. Can Donald Trump get it done? Yes, he can. Is there still a chance it gets done? Yes, it is, but it's really, really hard. They're simply pre-wired to spend money.
Mick Mulvaney, former OMB director, former White House chief of staff, former congressman from South Carolina. Thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Good to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. All right, guys. I really enjoyed that. What I want to do now, though, as I said at the beginning of the show, is give you a sense of what it's like to be a media member at the White House. So I want to walk you through the video that I shot, and then I'll explain some of it to you. Some of it I started to narrate at the beginning, and then I'm going to explain the end. So it's about a 2-minute video. It takes you what it's like to walk in. So when you walk in as a member of the media, you come in through 17th Street. So it's right across from Lafayette Park. And that's going to set the stage for the video that I'm going to show you now. Then what I'm going to do is bring you from there inside the briefing room. I'll show you what it's like, how the seating works, and then I'll show you the workspaces, because to me, that's fascinating. I think a lot of people, much like the briefing room, think it's a lot bigger than it is, and it's not. So take a look at the video, and then I'll walk you through some of it afterwards. Here we go. Hey, welcome to the White House. I want to give you a quick tour of the place in case you haven't been here before. So there you see the residence, but let me just show you how the press operates right here. That is the 17th Street exit behind me, and you see these green tents. This is affectionately referred to as Pebble Beach because it used to be sand and gravel and etc. It is now paved. Those green tents all represent a network that is where their reporters stand and do their live shots and their packages for the morning news, the evening news, etc. And then you can see as we go down further, the lawn there where a lot of other outlets don't necessarily have a tent will set up their positions to do their shots. That behind me is the West Wing, and you can see, I think, the Marine standing there at the door. When the Marine is standing at the door at the West Wing, that means the president is in the Oval Office. As we go further down the driveway here, that behind me right now is the press briefing room. You can see the entrance to the resident over there, so I'll take you inside the briefing room in just a sec. All right, welcome to the briefing room. This is the door from the driveway that we just came in right there. There's the podium, and as we spin around, this is the actual briefing room. 49 seats, 7 across, 7 down, and each seat has the name of the outlet that's been assigned to it by the White House Correspondents Association. I'll take a look and I'll show you what that looks like. All right. So you started off by seeing that, right? That's the entrance. You come in, as I mentioned, on 17th Street, right? 17th and Penn, right across from Lafayette Park. You come through those gates, and then you saw those white tents, as I explained. That's called Pebble Beach. It literally used to be, pebbles and sand and whatever, and they've now paved it and made it somewhat nice. Put those tents up to make it look nice as well, because it used to just be like a hodgepodge. And that's where all these outlets do when you look, the morning news, the evening news, and then you saw the guys on the sort of the grassy knoll. Those are guys that haven't gotten to the tent, but they kind of bid for those. And those are issued by the White House Correspondents Association. So this is a very interesting discussion. And then I brought you inside the briefing room. And you see it's a lot smaller than I think people maybe see on TV. You do have 49 seats in there, 7 across, 7 back. And then all of these people line up on the sides. And it's hot and gross. When the briefing goes on for a while, and the thing is, if you don't have a seat, you literally queue up on those walls 30, 40 minutes before, and you can't leave to go to the bathroom or anything, although there is a bathroom back there. But you're queued up. And so that's the thing. When you have a seat, you get to stroll in at the last minute. And I showed you see the name plate on the bottom, the Associated Press, that front row, Associated Press, Reuters, New York Times, ABC, NBC. And so you get to just stroll in and you're right there in the front row. Caroline has talked a lot about blowing this whole thing up, and I support that. Why do you guys get the front row seats? Why do you get a guaranteed seat and everyone else has to show up 45 minutes earlier? Because they want to make sure that they line the walls. And then the lower press area is where the assistant press secretaries, the deputy press secretary all work. And that's like 8, 9 people in that crammed little area. They call it lower press. The last thing I showed you up there, what they call upper press, is just outside the door and up, right? It's not far from the Oval Office, but that's where Caroline's office is, the communications director, Stephen Chung, and the deputy chief of staff for communications, Taylor Budowich. Then some of their assistants, but that's all there is. There's not a ton of space, is there? Very small, cramped quarters. When you're in the West Wing, proximity is key, not size. You go across the street to the old executive office building. I was over with Seb Gorka the other day. He's got a beautiful, ornate, massive office, but you're across the street. So you trade what you want. Anyway, I wanted to give you a sense of that. Tomorrow on the show, Reagan Reese, Natalie Winters are going to help us, or later on Wednesday, are going to give us a sense of working in the White House. So tomorrow, we're going to bring back the authors of Fight, that brand new book from Biden. Unbelievable. Wednesday, Natalie Winters and Reagan Reese of the Daily Caller. Natalie's obviously Bannon's War Room. So a lot going on this week, really bringing you inside the White House. Thanks for kicking off your week to us. Remember to sign up at SeanSpicer.com for my latest newsletter. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.